Our Bible word is Isaiah 26 verses 1 to 3. In that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. God will appoint salvation for walls and bulwarks. Open the gates that the righteous nation, which keeps the truth, may enter in. You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. So, this portion of Isaiah comes from chapters 24 to 27. And it's quite puzzling within Isaiah, because most of chapters 1 to 39 dates to the time of the prophet Isaiah himself, and he ministered from roughly 740 to 700 BC. But the vast majority of scholars see chapters 24 to 27 as being a later addition to that portion of Isaiah. And it also contains apocalyptic themes, like there's worldwide judgment, there's resurrection language, and God to come rule as king, etc. So it's quite puzzling for scholars in terms of in which context and where it was written. Some say maybe it was written in the 6th century, it was about 100 years after Isaiah. Others say it was in the Hellenistic period, that's roughly from 300 BC onwards, maybe it was written and then incorporated. So this chapters 24 to 27 is a bit of a puzzle in terms of when it was written. But what it concerns, chapters 24 to 27, is God will execute a worldwide judgment and also establish his earthly kingdom. And there are basically 4 big themes that we can look at in this portion of Isaiah. The first is that there will be a universal judgment. And that is chapters 24. It speaks there of a curse that will come upon the whole world, and that everybody, the highborn and the lowborn, will be affected. And also no one will be able to escape this worldwide judgment. And towards the end of chapter 24, the second theme also comes across is that God will conquer his enemies, including death, and he will rule as king in Jerusalem. If we go to chapter 24, for example, if you read verses 21 to 22, it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord will punish on high the host of exalted ones, and on earth the kings of the earth. They will be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit, and will be shut up in prison. So God he exercises his universal judgment, and he will also conquer his enemies, including these angelic beings that are spoken of here in verses 21, and also their earthly kings, those who oppose God, the God of Israel. And God will also rule as king. And if we go to verse 23, for the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and before his elders gloriously. So that's the second big theme. God will conquer his enemies, even death, and rule as king in Jerusalem. Especially this idea of death is quite interesting, because this Isaiah, or portion of Isaiah, also speaks of resurrection language. If we go to chapter 25 verse 8, it says there, he will swallow up death forever. And also in chapter 26 verse 19, it says, your dead shall live, together with my dead body they shall arise. Awake and sing, you who dwell in dust. For your dew is like the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead. This is what also causes puzzlement for scholars, because at this time of Isaiah, there was no belief in life after death. There was no belief in resurrection. So is this language just metaphorical, that God will restore Israel, or does it really refer to a resurrection of the dead? So that's part of this puzzlement that scholars have in terms of when was this portion of Isaiah written. But God will defeat death. And it also says God will swallow up death. If you go back to verse 8, he will swallow up death forever. For example, if you go to Isaiah 5 verses 14, it speaks there of Sheol. Sheol is the realm of the dead. that how widely it opens its mouth in a way to gulp up people, to swallow people. But here it says God, He will swallow up death forever. So where death and Sheol swallows people, the other language is God will swallow death. God will swallow Sheol and get rid of death. So that's the second big theme that comes through across. The third theme is that God will gather His people and restore Jerusalem. For example, if we go to chapter 25, verses 6 to 8. And in this mountain the Lord of hosts will make for all people a feast of choice pieces, a feast of wines on the lees, of fat things full of marrow, of well-refined wines on the lees. So God is saying here He will prepare a feast for His people in Jerusalem. It also symbolizes Jerusalem's restoration. Also, if we go to chapter 27, verses 12 to 13. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord will thresh from the channel of the river to the brook of Egypt. So in other words, from the Euphrates River, far in the east, to the river in Egypt to the west. And you will be gathered one by one, O you children of Israel. So God will gather His people, the exiles will come back, and also He will restore Israel, the nation as a people, etc. And now the fourth big important theme that also comes through here is that to those who trust Him, He promises rescue and security. And also here in Isaiah there's this language of Jerusalem that will be restored, but also the city. Now, if this is a historical city or a specific city that's in mind, or a city that symbolizes opposition to God, or both, we can only speculate, but this city that opposes God, God will bring to ruins. And this is already mentioned in chapter 25, verses 2. For you have made a city a ruin, a fortified city a ruin, a place of foreigners to be a city no more. It will never be rebuilt. So there's this city, the fate of the city, that is ruin, destruction, that's contrasted with Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem. That also affects our immediate textual unit here, and also our Bible word. Because our Bible word is a song. It's a song of praise. After universal judgment is announced in chapter 24, there's a song of praise in chapter 25. In chapter 6, there's also a song of praise that mentions things. And also chapter 27 is also a song of praise. But now specifically chapter 26, it opens with a song of praise about Jerusalem, the future fate of Jerusalem. And this is what it says. In that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. In other words, it refers to Jerusalem. God will appoint salvation for walls and bulwarks. Of course, bulwarks refers to walls being strengthened or even made higher. It's a source of protection. It's a barrier to keep enemies out. So the language is a metaphor. Jerusalem will be a place of safety and security. So God will appoint salvation for walls and bulwarks. Open the gates, that the righteous nation which keeps the truth may enter in. You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. So in other words, here's a promise to those who keep their trust in God. They're the ones that will enter Jerusalem. They're the ones that will come to Jerusalem and they will experience God's protection. They will be rescued, come to Jerusalem, then they will have peace and security within the holy city of Jerusalem. Then it also goes on to contrast the fate of this enemy city. In other words, those who are opposed to God and His people. For example, it says there first, it encourages the people in verse 4, trust in the Lord forever, for in Yah the Lord is everlasting strength. Now it speaks of this opposing city from verse 5. For He brings down those who dwell on high. The lofty city, He lays it low. He lays it low to the ground. He brings it down to the dust. Then verse 6, the the text also says that the poor, the downtrodden, those who are oppressed, they will actually go to the city that God has destroyed and they will stomp their feet on it because it's no more. Its oppression is no more there. They've been made free from it and liberated from it. So chapters 24 to 27, it's kind of like apocalyptic literature of later on. Also maybe a bit of like Revelation, where Jerusalem, or the heavenly Jerusalem from heaven, is contrasted with Rome. That's called Babylon in Revelation. The tale of two cities. So something here is going on, something similar. This evil city or civilization will be destroyed. Jerusalem will remain. It's steadfast. It will endure forever. And the people will come to it and they will experience safety and security. And there will be life. There will be resurrection, as we read in chapter 26, verses 19. So look out for these four themes. There will be a universal judgment. That's specifically in chapter 24. And God will conquer his enemies, including death, and he will rule as king in Jerusalem. So go look at those passages that are also listed there. And God will gather his people and restore Jerusalem. And then to those who trust him, he promises, that's God, promises rescue and security. It's also telling the people, I'm in control. Doesn't matter what you experience. And I promise these things and they will happen. Especially chapter 25, that song of praise. It's written from the perspective of this future generation who has already experienced God's salvation, where it praises God, what he has promised he has done. Of course, from this perspective, it's still to come. But that's what God promises his people: rescue and safety and security.